Okay, welcome to the State Representative District 3A Candidate Forum. Tonight we will hear from incumbent Roger Skraba, Republican from Ely, and Harley Droba, DFL from International Falls. I am Brian Larson, editor of the Cook County News-Herald. I'm pleased to be here as your moderator for the event, which is sponsored by the Lake County Press, KTWH Two Harbors Community Radio, and Jose Leon, Two Harbors Media. In addition to being live streamed on KTWH 99.5 FM and KTWH YouTube, we hope people will view and listen to recordings of this event, the links of which you can find on the Lake County Press Facebook page and in this Friday's edition of the Lake County Press. So we're going to get the rules here for this debate. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves at the beginning. You may give background and context to your candidacy. Each candidate will be given 3 minutes to respond to each question. You will receive a 30-second warning at 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and a warning when 3 minutes has elapsed. Candidates will be allowed up to 3 minutes to answer each question and are not obligated to use that entire time. Each candidate will have 2 minutes at the end of their forum for closing remarks. The moderator will alternate who gets the questions first, and if I mess up, you guys can remind me. And there's one more last rule. No wrestling, no spitting, and no swearing. All right, do you agree? All right. Okay, here we go. And these questions, by the way, came from members of the public, and so they're not necessarily mine or Kitty's. So I'll start with this one. Both candidates talk about responsible mining, and Droba specifically mentions logging.
Wait,
and
maybe we want to introduce ourselves.
Oh, I'm
first.
sorry. You guys,
That's
introduced yourselves first. I got ahead of myself.
Yeah, you're.
Okay.
I know you're just chomping.
Yeah, I'm a reporter.
Go ahead. You're the young guy.
Henry, you start.
Who's starting?
You start.
Okay. My name is Harley Droba. I'm the mayor of International Falls and the DFL endorsed candidate for Minnesota House of Representatives District 3A. The reason I'm running this campaign is I really believe that we need to adequately fund our ambulances and make sure that we have rural health care that is providing the services for the people in our area. About 17 years ago, my daughter was born, and it was an emergency C-section. Ultimately, she ended up taking an ambulance, a ALS service from International Falls down to Duluth. On the way down to Duluth, I got the phone call from the doctor saying, "Where are you?" And I said, "I'm just north of County 33." And they said, "Just go down to the cities." And so we ended up taking that turn, and they asked if I wanted to have my daughter baptized. I thought, yeah, we could pull that off. I didn't realize that it was so urgent that my daughter was baptized Lutheran by a Jewish rabbi on a helicopter. We ended up getting down to Minneapolis. She stayed in the hospital for about 2 weeks. And she's fine. She's 17 years old now, and she is fantastic. She has no long-term issues. However, it was so dangerous when she was first born. My issue is, as I've been in my role as mayor, I'm seeing that we are struggling to adequately fund our ambulances. If we don't have those ambulances to be able to get our loved ones to the second level of service, I think we're really dangerously putting ourselves in a bad position in rural Minnesota, and I'm willing to fight for rural health care and adequately funding our ambulances.
Thank you. Roger.
Thank you. My name's Roger Skraba. I'm from Ely, Minnesota, former mayor, 8 years. I'm currently the representative. I was elected 2 years ago, defeating the DFL candidate for 8 years, and prior to that, forever. So we've had a change in our populace, our voting, the way we vote. When I took this job, coming from a mayor, I was representing all the people. And then I got into a partisan job, and I've been trying really hard to be working across the aisle. And for my freshman year, I'm sort of blessed, I think, My senator is Senator Hochschild. He's a Democrat, and I'm a Republican, and we've been working together, and I've had other members in our caucus saying, you know, how do you talk to him? How do you call him? I go, with my phone. You know, it's like communication is key. And when we work together, we get a lot more done. We did really well for y'all, both last year and this year. I'll talk more about what we did as we go this evening. But one of the things I want to stress and show people is I have the wherewithal to do this job. I did it for 2 years as a minority. We're hoping we can take the House and put some parity back into legislating where we can have some checks and balances. And, you know, with the right thing that happens. One thing I do want to stress is don't get our race confused with the federal presidential thing. You know, I mean, they're their own people. I door knocked last year a lot, and it was always like, you know, well, I don't like this person, I don't like that person. So,
Okay,
thank
you, Roger.
Thank you.
All right, now we'll have the first question. Both candidates talk about responsible mining, and Droba specifically mentions logging and also as a part of economic growth. I'd like to hear more about how they define responsible and who is establishing regulations and how they plan to institute accountability in industries that have historically not considered environmental protections beyond what furthers their product. Roger, you can start.
Thank you. Just recently, the helium issue showed up. Lake County, the find is in Lake County. The state of Minnesota realized they have 0 regulations for helium. So I got to work with MPCA, DNR, all these different organizations setting up rules. And right now we gave them the opportunity, we gave them 24 months to get the rules in order. We're helping them fund that to do that too. So I understand what we need to do to make it safe, to do the right thing. I also worked across in a sense, the aisle. I sat with the Friends of the Boundary Waters in my office. They're usually against those sort of things. And Steve and I sat down and I said, Steve, if you could support this, the helium, it would be a really big deal. We got MEP, Minnesota Environmental Partnership, and Friends of the Boundary Waters to support the helium mining. So it's a step in a good direction for us. The copper nickel mining won't be as easy, but I think we have to quit comparing copper nickel mining to 1902 copper nickel mining. We have a lot of new technology. Wednesday I was in St. Paul and I met with the Canadian consulate. They're a person on the border that deals with watersheds and mining. We had a great conversation. She asked me the same question, you know, what are you going to do? How are you going to do this? I think what we have to do is we have to, as a government, set the standards. This is what you need to do. You meet or exceed. You can't cut the corners. So if we can, when we get those, and they have been met, but they keep changing them, at some point we need to decide, and Senator Hochschild got some permitting legislation passed this year that's going to help, but that it's just move in the right direction. We have to get better permitting reform so that these companies have the opportunity to mine the resources. Right now, the resources are coming from foreign countries, and it won't take long where the foreign country might say, you can't have any more nickel, you can't have any cobalt, you can't have any more of these precious metals. And we have them right here. Now, do I want to Johnny bar the door and just go in and do it willy-nilly? No. There are reasons that the regulations are there. We've been mining forever in northern Minnesota, a hole in the ground. This would be underground mining. The rock that we're mining, that we're going to mine, has 2 to 3% sulfur, and that's what the big tickler has been, how much sulfides are in that rock. So I'm hoping we can work together with the industry and do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Harley?
Yeah, one of the things that Roger said, and I would just love clarification from him, is permitting reform. I have been endorsed by Climate Cabinet, which is a organization on trying to stop global warming and climate change. And one of the ways that they look at doing that is by having wind and solar panels. We need these metals that we have in northern Minnesota, and I do support the mining of those metals. However, the last thing we need to do is roll back any permitting standards. We have some of the best standards in the world right here in Minnesota. We have great people that are able to do the work, good, strong union jobs. And I think that that's what we need to do, is work with the city, the states, and continue to try to get this to move forward.
Okay, Roger, do you want to answer?
Sure. The standards that have been set have been met. And those standards come, Twin Metals, Minnesota, Rio Tinto. These companies can meet those standards. And when they meet them, they go to court and they get sued because an agency didn't dot the I, cross the T. One organization talked to another organization, so therefore it's okay. Well, they get in court and they're like, oh, that's not okay. You've got to start all over and do it again. Okay. It's the same result. It's always been done. So.
Where's the permitting reform, though?
Harley?
So I'm good.
You're done? Okay, very good. All right, next question. A huge concern for Cook County is affordable housing. Both candidates have talked about supporting tourism in the district, but in Cook County, the increase in second homes and vacation properties have contributed to the shortage of housing stock and driven up property prices across the board. How do the candidates plan to support the tourism industry while also protecting residents from losing access to affordable housing? Harley?
Fantastic question. So the first thing I think we need to do is expand utilities, work with municipalities and with the county to expand the utilities so that they have the opportunity to build housing in these areas. And you have to start somewhere. That's the one thing that I think we spend so much time trying to do, is figure out what exactly it is we need. The reality is everything is going to move one way or another. So if you build senior housing, the people that are living in long-term housing or some beautiful homes on the lake, they're going to be able to make that move. That opens up those houses for affordable housing to go to the next level. We have to make a start. We have to go somewhere. And the point that you made about having affordable housing for people to work and not be a second home, that's a very, very tough issue. And I struggle with that because the folks that are living in this area are paying an additional cost to fund their schooling because there isn't the taxes that come in from non-residents' homes don't go to paying with the school districts. And that puts an unfair tax on the folks that are living here when we are looking at school referendums and raising the taxes locally. So I think that the state needs to adequately fund housing and be able to continue to work the process to make it easier for homes to be built, to kind of move and shift those groups.
Okay, Roger?
Yes, just to go back quickly, Senator Hochschild has the reform on the permitting. You can look up his stuff. The other thing, Cook County has 7% private property, 93% public property. As far as growing more land and trying to create that, there has to be a way to trade land so that we can get more private property so that we can expand housing. Right now, Cook County, I think the IRRB, which board I sit on, we okayed a fair amount of dollars for them to start building housing. It's going to make a difference up there right now. And we've worked, that's been a priority of ours, and in the legislature, we've been pushing housing, housing, housing. There's a shortage everywhere. The issue about the VRBOs, or people that are buying a second home and renting it and driving the cost of rent up, in St. Louis County, it was before our board. I was chairman of St. Louis County board when we did this, and it was a 8-to-1 vote, and I was the one that voted against it because I don't understand how we can allow commercial business in a residential area, still without suspending the laws and the rules. So the way to solve part of that problem, and which Mr. Droba spoke about, I was either co-sign of a bill or we started the bill, I can't remember this year, to take those dollars, when you have a second home, you don't pay the school tax. And we believe that that school tax is more important. Like Harley said, it's more important that the school district gets it than the taxpayer that doesn't pay for it. If it makes that person, if they say, well, then I can't afford to live here, then someone else will buy it and pay that. It has to, our school system is being punished because we have a great area to live in. Just for numbers' sakes, and I don't like throwing around too much, but 45% of the housing in District 3A is not residential housing. So what that means is 55% are homesteaded with who lives here. 45% of the housing stock isn't. And that's in the state, from the state of Minnesota. So we're the highest. I have not found anyone higher than that. 37% in central Minnesota.
Thank you, Roger.
Yep.
All right, next question. Do you support following up on the bill passed in the Minnesota House on May 19th, 2024, giving the people of Minnesota the opportunity to cast a binding vote on changing the Minnesota Constitution to provide protection under an Equal Rights Amendment? Roger?
Yeah, the bill was approved by the House of Representatives at the end of the legislative session. It was narrowly approved, 68-62, and it had bipartisan opposition. There were Democrats that voted against it and Republicans that voted against it. It was because the House version went way too far. It's simply, the original intent of the ERA bill was to equalize rights between men and women. And this one added everything under the sun, that all Minnesotans are entitled to equal protection. We already know that. We already do that. So they wanted to take this to the next level. These are the questions that we got early, so I had written down my thoughts on this. Instead of reaffirming the simple truth, a truth that all of us agree, the House majority went far beyond and sought to enshrine unrelated and controversial abortion policy, opposed by the majority of Minnesotans, and would have potentially limited religious liberty. When I talk about abortion, it's the whole 9 months. The first 3 months, we all agree that that should be part of the bill. But in Minnesota, we extended it far beyond. Simply put, the House version of the bill wasn't ready to go before the people of Minnesota for a vote, simply because of many unanswered questions. And I was there for the debate, and I was watching it, and it just, you couldn't make sense out of age. Don't you think age should be part of an equal rights amendment? We couldn't get them to agree that age should be part of it. Age isn't included in trying to get equal rights for people. So that's why I joined colleagues from both sides and opposed it.
Okay. Harley?
It was an easy question. Yes. Yes,
Okay.
I support that.
Okay.
Continuing it.
All right, thank you. Okay. Harley, you're going to start with this one. Why do you support or oppose such an amendment?
So I look at a lot of things in history. I look at timelines, and I spend way too much time thinking about things like this. It was in the 1920s where we actually had discussion and people fought for suffrage to be able to have the right to vote. Women ended up doing that and got those rights. In the 50s and 60s, the civil rights movement, we had black men and women ended up fighting to have the same rights as white people. And then in the 60s and 70s, that we had a movement to allow people to make decisions for their own body. In the 2010s, we ended up having marriage equality. And in 2020s, we're taking away some of those rights for the first time with Roe versus Wade. So I think when this ended up coming up through the House and the Senate of the state, they were trying to put some of those other things in it, because How are we 100 years later going back? How are we going backwards on the rights and the fundamental rights that people have? So that's why I support the equal rights. And I'll admit, it wasn't perfect. I've read it too, and I would agree that there are things that needed to be added. There was better language that could have been used, but I'd be willing to step in and be a champion to get that to the folks in Minnesota, because that's what it's about, right? It's democracy. We have the right to decide. Number one, the House and Senate have to get it onto the ballot, so if they don't do a good job, if we don't do a good job, that's on us. That's the electors can make a decision on if you want those people to go back and do their job. But once it's on the ballot, that's on the residents of Minnesota. And I think that it is owed to the residents of Minnesota to solidify an equal rights amendment for the people in Minnesota.
Thank you. Roger?
And I agree that the people of Minnesota should have the choice to vote on it. What's in it is what's the issue. I opposed the amendment for the reasons I stated before, but in the Senate, they had a much better bill that was more palatable, that came back, and we were ready to vote on that. We were going to vote on that, and then the bill disappeared, and it didn't get voted on at all. That's why we're at this juncture again. The way the House majority used this amendment, most of us would have been able to support it on its merits, but they took the political opportunity to exploit parts. And that's what's wrong in St. Paul. One of the issues that I saw after this went through, there was a podcast of the people who supported the House version, and their concern, the reason they wanted it to pass was an 8th grader, a 10 or 15-year-old person could decide if they want to be transgender or not and go through all the surgery, and they wouldn't have to tell their parents. And this bill would protect those kids from doing that. And fundamentally, I want to protect children. I don't want to give children opportunities to make mistakes that they might regret. When you're 18, you're free to do whatever you want. I'm not going to encumber you, do whatever you want. But until you're 18, I believe as government, we have a duty to protect children, whether from themselves or from their parents or from government. And I think that this one went too far. And I just, if it does come back, I will support it if we can get some of these other more harsh issues out of it that I believe.
Thank you. Okay. If you support an amendment vote by the people, what equal rights protection would you want to see included in the amendment to be put to a statewide vote within 2 years? Roger.
Yeah, I'm just going to kind of reiterate. I'd have no issue sending the Equal Rights Amendment to Minnesota voters if the language from the House version is tightened up and more narrowly focused at addressing the true intent of the ERA movement that has existed for decades. Using it as a vehicle to shoehorn a variety of divisive social issues instead of reaffirming our commitment to equal protection under the law is wrong.
Thank you. Harley?
All right, this might be the first time you guys see the way I think about stuff. I think if we're going to have an equal rights amendment, I think everything that's in there should be what we allow old straight white guys to have. You know, I think it should be on race, it should be on color, on sexual origin, disabilities, religion, sex, have the right to marriage, make decisions for your own body. I don't know why it would be so difficult to be able to allow people to be who they are.
Thank you. Minnesota is now ranked second in the nation for insurance risk, and as a result, our insurance premiums are skyrocketing, and some insurance companies are pulling out of Minnesota altogether. Damage from climate change-induced weather events are driving these costs, rising costs. What will you do to reduce emissions and curb rising insurance? Harley?
I am not an insurance person. I don't know the answer to that one. I'll be the first to admit I don't know the answer to that. But that's why I'm very happy that I've been endorsed by Climate Cabinet, who have scientists. They have people that can work with elected officials to come up with game plans on how to look at that. I realize that insurance goes on pools, and I'm not certain how that goes by states, by regions. But I don't think that it's right that as we have climate change and it is affecting the East Coast, West Coast, and our premiums may be going up because of that. I don't think that's right. But again, I don't have an answer for that. I do know that it is something that needs to be looked at, and working with people that know that information considerably better than I do.
Yeah, thank you. Roger?
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, I sure can. Minnesota is now ranked second in the nation for insurance risk, and as a result, our insurance premiums are skyrocketing, and some insurance companies are pulling out of Minnesota altogether. Damage from climate change-induced weather events are driving these rising costs. What will you do to reduce emissions and curb rising insurance costs?
So, it's somewhat, the question kind of contradicted itself, saying we have the highest rates, number two, and they have the most sales, and so I'm trying to figure out, but regardless of that, we have an opportunity in Minnesota to create energy with hydrogen or nuclear, and that would lower all the emissions of any power company. We thought we could get a nuclear bill passed to study, at least open the door to study if nuclear would work in Minnesota. And we couldn't get that over the finish line. We couldn't pass that bill. We thought we could, because solar and wind is great, but it's not reliable. It's just not reliable. You can't rely on it. Hydrogen right now, there's a nickel mine in, I can't remember, Aiken County, and there's a rock that they're going through called olivine, and the NRRI, the Natural Resources Institute in Duluth, they are doing a study. When you put CO2 over olivine, it creates hydrogen. So they're thinking if we take the mineral out of the hole and pump it with CO2, in 8 or 9 months, you get hydrogen. So now they're doing studies on if they can crush it or use it whole and do it in a mine, in a building, and then create hydrogen. Hydrogen's clean and it's safe, not safe, it's very explosive, but it's clean, and if you don't have to transport it and you make it and use it right there, then we can have energy, cleaner energy there. That's one of the things, and I'm really pushing. I'm hoping we can do something like that.
Okay, thank you. With rural schools, including Lake Superior School District 381, struggling mightily with funding and having to lay off teachers and reduce programs, what will you do to help bring more money into our school district or otherwise support our schools? This would be Harley, or no, Roger.
Is it my turn?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is, yeah.
Well, if we can get that helium going in 2 years, there's a really good chance that the school district's going to benefit greatly from that. And that's a step in the right direction. If we get copper nickel mining, they're really going to benefit from it. They'll get more funding to help operate. But those are ifs and wishes. So hopefully we can keep moving that. One of the things I know I won't do is I won't do what the legislature did 2 years ago, where they had record spending for education, beyond more money than ever. And they put 17 mandates on that. So all the money that they got was already spent. And now they're even in the hole, the school districts. So that was not very good to do to the schools. What we need to do is we need to sit down with the schools and the school boards. And the school boards, if they need money, and if they come to the legislature and say, hey, we're short. I also voted for the school lunch program, so that every kid could get fed. That was the right thing to do. But some schools didn't need that much. Some schools needed less. If we would have gave them the money to buy the food and use the money for other things if they needed to. That would have been the right thing to do. I think school boards are the solution to this. If we can, the legislature can step out of the way and just give the money to the school boards and let those local school districts help solve this problem.
Thank you. Harley?
First, I just want to say thank you to Roger for funding the school lunch program. That's so important for the kids that are in the school. The second piece, and the question at hand, is fund education. You know, that's the key in all of this, and it's one of the things that I really do struggle with as an elected official and as a resident that is dealing with some state politics. There's a lot of things that the state doesn't fund, and by not funding those, it ends up falling onto the school board, nonprofit groups, different people that are stepping in to try to make it better. For so long, we've done more with less, and we're at a breaking point where we have teachers that are getting out of the field. We have people that are slowly but surely deciding that they're going to do something else, and who does that ultimately hurt? It hurts the kids, it hurts the families. So I would argue that the state needs to fund education, make sure that the teachers are taken care of, and then that lowers the taxes on the bottom end, because the school isn't going to be doing referendums. The school isn't going to be raising your property taxes. And it makes it a more adequately fair system if the state were to fund education rather than the municipalities that are funding for like we were just discussing, the non-residential homestead, or the non-homesteaded properties. We need to adequately fund education and make sure that the kids have good education and a good lunch, and Roger helped with that.
Thank you. What can you do to move closer to constructively disagreeing with the other party in the House, and even though you may not support their preferred policies, still manage to get work done for the district you represent and build trust within our governing bodies? Harley?
Well, I think that's where the problem is. I think that's where we do struggle in government, is we have labels. I'm running as a DFL, therefore I must absolutely hate Roger, and I don't. I think Roger is a great human being. I like Roger. I think I could do a better job at the legislature and get more things done. But that doesn't mean he's a bad person. We could go out and have lunch. We have had lunch. The thing of it is you have to understand that we all have the same core needs and wants. We want our families to be taken care of. We want to have money in the bank, and we want to be able to spend time with our friends and family. It's important. How do we get there? We have to make relationships. We can't be blaming everything on the other side. I got in a big to-do over a Facebook post because I said, you know, we have a rural versus metro, and people got upset about that. And my point was, we really need to make sure that the rural has the same opportunities as the metro. Not that the metro is bad or anything like that. We need to work as a team. We need to sit down and have conversations, and we need to once we get into legislature, we got to drop some of those labels. Yeah, we have core beliefs, but there's a time for those, and there's a time to sit down at a table, have good discussion, and come up with policy that's good for everybody in Minnesota.
Thank you. Roger?
Yeah, so I'm actually the person practicing that. I've reached over many times. My senator's a Democrat. We get along really good. We work together. We got a lot of bonding projects together. We work together. We know how to do, we help each other when we have to. It's the Democrat House side, my side. Last year when the session was over, I had no less than 8 or 10 members, Democrats, that wanted to come up fishing. You know, and I'm like, good, let's do it, let's make time. And every time we tried to make time, my schedule, their schedule. But, you know, when I win again next year, I'm going to make a point to make time to get those folks up here, because those are the relationships that build on it. I was on capital investments this year, traveling the state with Dean Erdahl, who's been there 27, 8 years, and Leon Lilly, who's been there just shy of that. And the two of them were talking about in the old days how they used to do stuff together, Democrat and Republican. And I'm sitting in the middle looking at them, and I'm kind of like, why can't we do it now? And party politics is one of the reasons. It's all about the money. How much money can the party raise? How much can it not? I personally despise that part of politics. I have a hard time understanding why you want to give me money so I can get a job, but I understand what I do affects you, so it makes sense. But at the same time, it's just, I like doing the work. Not saying I do it for free, but but I really like to do this job, and I like to keep doing it and working across the aisle. CPAC, Conservation Political Action Committee from the nation, ranks each member, and 100 is good. I got a 68. Obviously, I don't follow the path that I'm supposed to. I follow the path that represents you all. So that's the way I deal with my time in the legislature. And when I see things like the food bill or like the environment bill when it came through, there was just two of us Republicans that voted for the environment bill. I had 31 projects on it that were a lot of them in this area. The Gitchigami Trail, I could just go up and down the North Shore with all the projects that I support, but I couldn't vote for it. It would have passed anyway because 70 to 64, but I represent you. I have to support it. And I took a lot of heat for that, but I'm willing to do it again.
Thank you, Roger. In Minnesota, we have an ongoing debate about how best to fix paying for health care. There's a strong push in Minnesota to create a single-payer program. Are you for or against that proposal? Any other ideas? Roger, you first.
I think I'm for it in a modified way. I think after seeing how much the health care costs, about a month or so ago, I had a couple stints put in, and I finally got the bill the other day. It was $125,000. I was there 2 days. Yeah, it's just like, wow, what is going on? And had I not had insurance, I don't know how I could afford that. It's just not even close to being I could afford. So I look at single payer, and when Obamacare came out, the Mayo Clinic sat down with the president and said, hey, we got a really good plan. Why don't we go to a single payer, and then if you want more, you can pay more a la carte. If you want more, you pay more insurance for it. And it didn't go. When President Reagan was president, he almost got government sanctioned health care because all the big businesses came to him and said, hey, can you get this albatross off our back? Like GM, all the auto companies, because they were paying everyone's health care, and that price kept rising and rising, and they were trying to figure out how to get rid of it, so that they could let someone else pay. And it didn't work then. I think we need to look at healthcare a lot harder than we are now, and not point fingers that, oh, you're for that and you're for that. We got to stop that on this issue alone. No one owns this issue. We have to solve this issue together. And if it means single payer in a modified version, then it does. But we have to look at this thing and not say it's a Democrat or a Republican issue. It's affecting every one of us in some way or shape or form.
Thank you, Roger. Harley?
So I own 3 businesses in International Falls, and by no means am I rich or have a lot of money. We struggle just like everybody else does, and one of the things that we really struggle with is insurance. Half of our annual income goes to premiums for our insurance because we don't qualify for anything else. That's one of the things I'm hearing on the doors. I've knocked every city in this district already, and that's what I'm hearing is we need a single payer system. We need to be able to have our healthcare system changed here in Minnesota so that people can afford it. Both people that are working, people that are not able to get out there, and people that are small business owners. That's really the backbone of our communities, are these small business owners. And people think that there's a lot of money coming into those small businesses, and the reality is they're scraping by just like everybody else. We need to have a single payer system that would help and benefit everybody in 3A and in the state of Minnesota.
Yep, thank you. In these past two sessions, legislators spent the $18 billion surplus, raised $10 billion in new taxes, raised fees on many state services, added a tax on home deliveries, prioritized the tax credit on new electric bike purchases, enacted a paid leave program that's already 25% over budget, and it's not even up and running. So how would you ensure controls on spending and taxation if you were elected? Harley?
Taxes suck. The reality is taxes do pay for fundamental services that we have in Minnesota that we expect. I think we need to make sure that we're funding the programs that we have. I think that we need to look to see what programs we are missing out on, but these are services that people have come to expect in Minnesota. One of the things that came out of that big surplus that you said is emergency service funding. We're seeing that being used right now all over Minnesota with the flood. And the thing of it is sometimes you have to have money set aside, and sometimes you have to be ready. Both myself and Roger understand that from being mayors of our communities. You have to have money set aside to be able to be ready when something happens, or when you need to pay for a road, when you need to have new equipment, infrastructure. So I think that that's one of the key things that we need to do, is make sure that we're adequately funding our education, our healthcare system, and make sure that we have money for projects such as infrastructure or roads, sewer, water, and bonding projects, because bonding projects are so important for our communities, and it puts people to work.
Thank you. Roger?
Excuse me. Question again, sorry.
Yeah.
Not the whole thing, just towards the end.
Okay.
Oh, I remember now.
Okay.
I think I remember. Right. You forgot, I know what I was going to say. You forgot the 40% increase in government on that.
Yeah.
So what happened, the legislature spent $17.5 billion, and I defy anyone in this room to tell me where it went, because I've tried. I've sat in committees, I've asked, I've called everyone trying to find where all of the money went, and it is chasing my tail. It's frustrating. They did not save any. We put money into 23 million into 28 million into the emergency fund, and we triggered another 50 million at the end of this fiscal year. If there's a surplus, which there is, there's a surplus, so we'll be able to take that 50 million into the emergency fund, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, in another question. But we raised government. It's really 38%, but we're using 40 for commercials. If I owned a business and I increased my spending by 38%, I have to raise my fees and everything else to pay the 38% the next year. This body that passed this hasn't done anything. They're going to raise taxes for $10 billion, but it still doesn't cover that part of the increase. And we're not sure what's going to happen when because the next session we're going to do the budget again, and we're not sure how they're going to do it. One of the ways is to, a lot of larger businesses have deductions, tax deductions. They might take those away. So if a business that normally has a fairly large tax deduction can't do that anymore, and they have to pay the government with it, that money that maybe they were using for employees isn't going to be there anymore, and we could, It's unsustainable what they did, what the Democrats did this last session. And we're going to pay for it. We're going to pay for it at some point. Even if we grow the economy, it's not going to be enough to do what happened. How can we get the very end question, part of the end of the question? I didn't write it down.
So
sorry.
how would you ensure controls on spending and taxation?
Right. So it's going to have to happen. When we sit down and look at how much money is being spent in government right now, we're either going to have to decide what's not going to get paid for, or we're going to have to increase taxes. That's the only way. And I agree with what Harley said. Taxes suck, but it is a necessary evil. But at some point, we got to quit punishing ourselves by saying, I really need that. I really need that. You don't need that. You want that. You know, the need is your wastewater plant, your water plant, your bridges, your road. I sat on capital investments. I've seen those needs, and we didn't have a bill this year.
Thank you, Roger.
Yep.
What is your opinion of the last-minute 1,400-page omnibus bill being brought to the legislature in the last 20 minutes of the last session? Roger?
This is how I sat when it came. I tried to convince our caucus that we should all stand up and put tape over our mouths because they basically shut down people's voices to be discussed on what 1,400 pages. None of us Republicans voted on it because it's just a dastardly way to do business. You would never run your business that way. You wouldn't run your house that way. I wouldn't run City Hall that way. I wouldn't do anything that way. And there's this finger pointing, well, you talk too long. It's like, you have the votes, 70 to 64. At any point during that week, you could have started passing those separate bills. They chose not to. They chose to do what they did. I think it's despicable. I'm embarrassed more than anything because when I have to ask these questions, it's not the way I would do government. And I can promise you when Representative Zlezikar were sitting there, I told her, I said, do you ever want to do what they did? Do you want to be like that? No. I'm like, neither do I. So, I mean, I'm telling you publicly, we would never do that. And you can say, oh, that's not. No, I wouldn't. I truly wouldn't do that. It's not fair to the people. It's not fair to the system. And it's surely not fair. It's not good government. So I'm embarrassed by it.
Okay, thank you. Harley?
I wouldn't like that in any position either, whether I was in the majority or the minority. 1,400 pages, I read. I want to read. I know that you can have your legislative aides help you with what's in the bill, but I wouldn't want that either. I can say though, it was the DFL had the House as that happened, and I think it's great that that Representative Skraba wouldn't be the one who did that, but it did happen in 2016 when the Republicans were in control. So if we're going to blame parties, it happens. It happens in government. People get frustrated and need to push it through. What does bother me about this is that the tax bill at the very end, that ended up having a lot of projects that came to northern Minnesota and ended up passing. But Roger didn't vote on those. And so $50 million that came to our district ended up being passed from other legislators that ended up coming up here. And I think that if nothing else, should have been in the room and not dealt with the partisan politics and voted for the bills that were important to this area.
Can I read 30 seconds?
Yep.
So I was author of the bill. I was author of that bill with, it was actually $80 million for northern Minnesota, the Iron Range. And I had all intentions, went outside in a rotunda, saw Representative Lizagard, Senator Hochschild. I said, hey, tax bill coming through? Yep. I said, I can vote for this one. The Senate adjusted the House's tax bill. I was like, all right, we're going to vote for it. Well, then all of a sudden it became the vehicle for every bill. Every single bill was on the tax bill.
Thank you, Roger. Harley, do you want to respond at all?
Well, just that he wanted to vote for it but he couldn't because of partisan politics. He wanted to vote for it, but he couldn't.
Okay, thank you. Okay, last year, listening sessions with state legislators were held in Two Harbors, where a wide variety of people, constituents, and local business owners said that the #1 priority was securing funding to fill the $11 million gap to complete the Highway 61 reconstruction project in our community. In the end, Republicans voted against this legislation, citing concerns about the total cost of this transportation funding bill and objections to some of the other projects funded by it. To what extent do you feel it's your responsibility to support with your vote legislation that would help your constituents, even if it goes against your party's wishes? Harley?
I think that your job is to represent the district, the people that live here, and it's to my point on the last issue. If there is something that comes up and it is so important to the folks in northern Minnesota in District 3A, and there's something that comes up that ends up being a funding of project in the metro or in southern Minnesota that doesn't make sense to me, my representation is for the folks here. We need to get those projects done here. That would have been people coming into our area, staying in our hotels, working on these projects, and eating in our restaurants and building our local economy, not to mention the road itself. So I think that we have to get past partisan politics. I mean, I can't imagine that that's 2 years ago when Roger ran against Rob Eklund. One of the things he said is he votes 100% with the DFL. I wouldn't do that. He doesn't vote 100% with the DFL, but he doesn't vote for the projects that concern us here in northern Minnesota.
Okay, Roger?
Yeah, and you're talking about the project in Two Harbors itself?
Yep.
I believe Grant pulled that and put it in the tax bill, if I remember right.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but I thought that's what he did. Because we were all on board. I was actually co-sponsor of that bill to redo the highways, even though it's not in my district. Two Harbors isn't in our district. But I did a lot of that I got on all kinds of bills in Duluth on the wastewater plant and all that good stuff. But the point is once in a while, you get a bill like that it's like, boy, I have to support that. And then you find out that your colleagues, your other people across the aisle are going to vote for it. And it's like, okay, the other things in that bill that were damaging to other places in the state that just don't make sense. I mean, I could give you all kinds of examples, but yes, there are things. I did that on the environment bill. I voted for it even though it wasn't good for the whole state as a whole, but it did support my district a lot. On that transportation bill, there was, and I can't think of it right now, I don't remember why, but it wasn't even close to support. And I thought Grant had pulled it out and put it in a tax bill. I could be wrong, but I thought that's what he did.
Okay.
I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I get a minute.
Sure.
I do want to say that when you're in the majority, you can move things around like crazy. And when you're in the minority, you can't. You just sit and watch, and then they can make you do things you don't want to do because you need to support your district with it. And then they put other things in it. And sometimes they're moral issues, sometimes they're financial issues that you don't want to support. So that's the politics end. To me, that's where if we spent more time together, we wouldn't do that to each other as much. So I'm hoping that I have that opportunity again to do that, to work to get some of that out of politics. I think it's permeated way too long, and I'm going to throw a cheap shot out there. I'm going to blame Senator Marty for banning alcohol in the House building, because when they used to have beers in their office, they'd all get along famously and they worked together, and then they banned it, and then everyone hates each other now. Thank you. Sorry, cheap shot.
No, it's okay. Okay, Roger.
Yeah.
Excuse me. How can we help ensure rural communities have affordable, reliable, nearby medical services, from EMT to clinics to hospitals, and specialists to keep our communities viable places for people of all ages to live. Roger?
So House File 4738, I was co-author on and helped pass. It was Office of Emergency Medical Services. Take that back. That was the Hewitt one. I was on the Lislegard one. Take that back. I did not, I voted in favor of this. I wasn't the author of it. I take it back. I was trying to remember if I was. Representative Hewitt wrote this bill to help rural Minnesota with ambulance. It was specifically for rural Minnesota. And when he first wrote it, it was terrible. He even admitted it, and then he changed it so he would help northern Minnesota because Dave and Grant were working with him on it, and it was a big deal. We were gonna get this thing across the finish line. We have a demonstration project in northeast Minnesota where they're gonna have not quite an ambulance, but paramedics in vehicles that travel around and kind of wait for the accident to happen, and they're gonna be in that area. They have a algorithm that says this is what's gonna happen and when, so they're gonna use that to do it. They've been doing it in western Minnesota and it's worked, so they're gonna try it up here and see if it works. Again, this is rural Minnesota. The biggest problem with ambulance, by far, is the federal government not paying their fair share on the mileage. Once that number gets adjusted, it'll make ambulances a little more, and I say a little more, you won't have to subsidize it as much. This group also, this bill created an Office of Emergency Medical Services. And the idea is to take these areas, ambulance areas, and change them and make them more workable. The city of Ely, the city of Babbitt, city of Tower just had an expert for the Ely Bloomington Hospital paid a firm to come in and do a study. And if Ely, Tower, and Babbitt work together and put an ambulance in each community and base it at the fourth one, another one in Ely, at the hospital, it would cash flow. It would, with the way it is right now, it actually would work. But we can't get the two communities and all three communities to agree to this. And it's mind-numbing because it's the right thing to do, but you're giving up your little fiefdoms and you're changing. And I think this office has an opportunity to change that. We're gonna see how it works. Representative Hewitt is a EMT, so he has expertise in this, so I'm following his lead. He's a Democrat, he's a good guy, great guy, I like him. I work with him on this, so hopefully we'll do some fine tuning on this bill.
Thank you, Roger. Harley?
At the beginning of January of this, actually go back even farther than that, let's go to the summer of last year. I reached out to my state representative, Roger Skraba, to talk to him about ambulance issues. International Falls is $1.6 million in the hole. We have been as high as $6 million in the positive in a dedicated fund, and over the course of the last 10, 15 years, we've been losing $250,000 a year. I reached out because I wanted to talk to my state representative about the issues that we have in International Falls, gave him 3 opportunities to come and talk to us, whether it was in person or via Zoom. Never had those conversations. The issues that he's bringing up, I am completely aware of. One of them is a PSA issue. It's a primary service area. International Falls services 6.6 square miles, but yet we service 1,000 square miles, and in that area, it's 50-50. Half of our calls come from International Falls, half of them come from the other districts. Just like Representative Skraba just said, we have 4 different units of government that we have to service, but they do not have to pay for that service. It's part of the MSRB, and there needs to be changes at the state level to allow municipalities and areas to be able to charge for the services that they have. Because just like he had brought up, we do not have any local control on that, and we are subsidizing the federal government with Medicare, Medicaid. Every time an ambulance rolls out in northern Minnesota, they're going somewhere for an hour, 2.5 hours, and your EMS and your ALS service is gone and coming back. It's taking away from your local communities, and above and beyond that, it's taking away from your tax base because someone has to pay for that. And it needs to be changed at the state level, and I will spend every single waking moment at the legislature trying to change that so that the smallest communities and the poorest communities in the state of Minnesota do not have to continue to subsidize Medicare, Medicaid, and have access to reliable ambulance service. It is the most important thing for the folks that live in northern Minnesota is to know that you're going to be safe. We have lots of conversations all the time about, oh, if you don't fix that pothole, someone's going to die. No, this is actually real. If we do not fix our ambulance service and our rural health care system, someone is going to die, and it's going to be one of our loved ones. That is why I am running 100% for the Minnesota House of Representatives.
Okay, Roger, you want to respond?
Yes, yeah. I find it odd because the Democrats had full control for 2 years and squat got done. They had to wait till the very end to do it. They didn't do anything about it. We knew that we pushed them. We wanted to do something. Nothing. Prior to this, they also had the control to do this. They didn't do anything. I don't know why it's not an issue. Well, I can tell you why. Because the majority of the people in the House and Senate are from the Metro. And they look at rural Minnesota and they just like, well,
Thank you, Roger.
Then why didn't our representative listen to the concerns of our community?
I already was working on it. That's the part that.
So you don't have to listen. Great.
Yeah, that's your opinion.
Okay, let's move on. Small Minnesota towns seem to be facing shortages of affordable housing options for folks who seek to live and work here. If the private sector doesn't close the gap, what do you see as the role of the state and local governments to help address those needs in a timely way? Harley?
Can you read just the beginning of that?
Sure.
I missed it.
Small Minnesota towns seem to be facing shortages of affordable housing options for folks who seek to live and work.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. And yeah, that's a housing issue that kind of goes back to the last one. How do we get affordable housing? How do we get people to come in and be able to build and rehab some of these projects? There is a lot of money that has came to local communities in northern Minnesota, and I believe the bill ended up providing a substantial amount specifically for rural Minnesota. I think a lot of it comes down to working with the communities, making sure that you have areas that are quick and accessible to be able to purchase, to be able to build forward. I know that there are programs out there that don't go as utilized as they should. That's an educational piece. We are seeing a lot of growth in certain areas in Minnesota utilizing those programs, and I think it comes down to education and just making sure that people know that those programs are out there and are available.
Okay, Roger.
Yeah, the current federal administration's got the interest rate so high no one can afford it, and inflation. So until you fix that, no one's going to buy a house. People that have money, they just can't afford it. So till someone figures out how to get that interest rate down, and it's not going to happen with the administration that's there now. It's just not happening. What would I like to see? The IRRB, we are working desperately, and I say desperately because we're putting a lot of money into housing, and the problem we're having is trying to find people to build it. There's not enough builders. We're trying to get builders to come up, developers, and look at it. And again, that interest rate is so high. It's, when it was 2.5%, 3%, it was doable. When it's 9 and 12%, it's not doable. And it doesn't look like it's coming down anytime soon. So, we're in literally a holding pattern. There are young people in the metro area that want to move up north and build a house and move there because with the new broadband and that they can move up here and do that. But to build that house, it costs so much more, and they're like, we're not ready to move yet. And there is no stock available. Again, all the houses that are available, the people that have the means are buying them. Silver Bay is a classic example. I don't know how many empty homes are in town now, but 2 years ago when I was door knocking here, there were very few. And it was because everyone was buying them up as a vacation home. So till we figure out how to get that interest rate down, to get people to purchase, to get involved, I don't know the silver bullet. I don't think there is one.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, how do you see the choices we face in protecting the environment while creating economic benefit? Specifically, how do our responsibilities to future generations impact how we respond to proposed sulfide or copper nickel mine development? Background: in Minnesota is one of the best places prepared to mine in an environmentally sound manner. Why have we witnessed a number of proposals to roll back standards on sulfate, wild rice protections, water quality standards, wetland protections, and why are there continuing efforts to reduce the rigor of the permitting process and to curtail citizens' options to appeal the mining permits in our court system? If mining in our wet Northland environment is a sound idea, why aren't the standards we say that we are proud of worth keeping? Roger?
That's a book.
That is a book. I agree. I didn't write it, guys.
I mean, I was following it, and then all of a sudden I'm like, what's the question? I mean, there's statements in there that say, you know, are we lowering the water? Are we trying to lower the wild rice standards? Well, there are people trying to, and RRIs trying to figure out why is it so high. It's an arbitrary number pulled out of the air, and now they're trying to say, does it need to be that? Can it be lower? Can it be? Will it affect things? We have people studying that. What's the other part of the question? I mean, there's so many questions in there that I'm...
There are a lot of questions in here. If mining in our wet Northland environment is a sound idea, why aren't the standards we say we are proud of worth keeping? So
why aren't the what?
The standards we say we are proud of worth keeping.
Oh, we should keep them. I'm a firm believer of we set those standards. The public, we elect people to make sure they are. I'm going to uphold. I don't care how much money the company has and says we're going to bring you 1 million jobs, blah blah blah. I don't care. The main thing here is we've always used the nature to make a living in northern Minnesota. Mm-hmm. And they still come here because it's pristine, it's still beautiful. The goal is to keep it that way. And if the MPCA, if the DNR has the standard set, this is what we want, and the mining company meets and exceeds them, then there's no reason not to permit them. That's just, I mean, I don't see us rolling back. I don't think any of us would say, oh, geez, you know, that's too hard for them to do. No. If that's what it is, wait a year or two, re-engineer, figure this thing out. When copper nickel mining first came, 60s, something like that, it was like, oh, we're going to do it. We weren't ready. You know, in the 90s, we were getting ready, still wasn't ready. 2024, we're getting real close to being ready. We know what causes the pollution. We know how to mitigate it. We know how to hold it. Those are things we need to start putting into our code so that we can advance it. No is not an answer. Sorry. And I've been listening to no my whole life. No, no, no. No, we're going to do yes. And we're going to do it. We're going to do it right. I absolutely believe we should hold whatever standards there are. I'm not saying we should lower those standards. Permitting reform in the sense of the amount of time, 30 years for a permit, please, don't insult me. That is just wrong. And it's just wrong in the suing and everything. You know what? If you don't trust the DNR, if you don't trust the MPCA, who do you trust?
Thank you, Roger. Harley?
I would just say that I am not in favor of permitting reform, and I don't think that we should be rolling back any of our standards. I think that they're there for a good reason. I believe in science. I believe that we can do it here in Minnesota, and I think that it makes sense. However, I don't think that we should lower our standards to allow that to happen. We have strong standards for a reason, and I think that that's how we need to move forward.
Okay, thank you. Well, it looks like we have about 5 minutes left. Let's see. Can we do some quick questions here? Quick.
We're at your mercy.
All right, okay. Abortion, Roger, for or against?
Huh?
Abortion.
It's a woman's body. It's her decision.
Okay, Harley,
It's a woman's body to make their decisions.
very good. Term limits, Harley,
100%.
Roger?
Yes.
What is the main job of the Minnesota House of Representatives? Roger?
What's the main job?
Yeah,
Making sure that the laws passed won't be coming back.
okay. Harley,
To represent the people that you represent.
very good. All right, can we have some closing statements from you? Let's do Harley first.
Yeah, number one, I just want to say thank you for the folks coming out tonight. This was a good time. The one thing that I did find interesting in all of this stuff this evening is Representative Skraba has mentioned multiple times on how important it was to have Grant Housechild carry a bill in the Senate to be able to get it to pass. He mentioned Dave Lislegard, all of the bills that he co-signed onto Dave Lislegard's work. We need effective leadership. We need someone that's going to be writing these bills, the people that are going to be in the room, not just signing on to someone else's work. Grant Housechild is a workhorse. I am a workhorse. I think that we can represent the folks in District 3A considerably better. I think we can be more efficient and be able to really, really have a good working relationship for the folks in District 3A. Thank you so much for coming out tonight.
Thank you. Roger?
Thank you. It's apparent that the mayor doesn't understand how politics works in St. Paul, because the minority can write bills till they're blue in the face and they're not going anywhere because the chairs are Democrats and they're not letting any Republican bills through. So I co-sign on those bills because I know it's going to get through. There were many Wolf bills this year. I co-signed on the Wolf bill that Dave Lislegard wrote because I know it was going to get a hearing. There was 7 Republican bills in Wolf. They never even saw the light of day because that's how politics works in St. Paul. And right now, again, Grant Housechild is ahead by 1, actually none. They're neutral right now. They don't have any more power than the Republicans. So when I say I work with him because he has the votes to get that done for our district. I am willing to step across the line to do that. We need that. I'm not a bull in the china shop. I can figure things out pretty fast. When we take the House, now I'm going to be writing the bills. I'm going to be the one doing the hard work, setting the bill up, setting the hearings up, doing that, working with Grant so that the people that come down to testify, if they're still in the majority, so that we can work together. This is my goal. My goal is to show people that we do and can work together. The trifecta didn't work. I just can't stress it enough. It's too bad. I spent 2 years, 70 to 64, watching people cheer after they passed a bill. Really? You were winning when you started and you won when you went and you cheer. I don't get it. That was demeaning. But I thank you for allowing us to do this. Thank you for coming. I thank all the people in District 3 for their support, and I look forward to serving them again next year.
Yep. Thank you, Roger. Yep. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Kitty, for putting this together, and thank you to KT, WH, and the Lake County Press. Appreciate it. I hope you all have a good night.
You too.
Good. Oh, thank you.